this looks good.
Oh my god, this is delicious.
I definitely want to taste that.
All right. So now we're going to move into our plate of the day. Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I'm funnier than you. So we want to dig deeper into your experience as a comic. Yes, a Black comic. Yes, a Latinx comic. Yes, all the fucking bags of identities and things that you wear in one that not only influence your jokes and what you're delivering, but also shapes your experience and the way that you tackle the grind of your evolution in this career. So I wanted to hear about what your relationship was with comedy before you were a comic, how it evolved into you becoming a comic, and your general perceptions about comedy in general, which you did touch on a little bit when we were talking about, but I'd love to unpack a little more.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up like, I'm embarrassed. Like I didn't see Delirious or Raw until like last year. Like that's where I'm at in comedy, right? And it's scary because like when you're out on the streets, like these are people that like have studied comedy and are out there doing it. And one thing that I am grateful, even though I was late to the game of studying, I think what happens with a lot of comics, they find a comic they like and they try to mimic them. And then you start seeing that they don't have their own individual like persona. So I think that's something that worked in my favor because I'm not looking like, I'm like, oh, I want to be like Eddie Murphy. Let me do this joke like that, right? I'm literally on stage talking my shit. And I think that it makes me feel insecure sometimes. But one of the things like that was interesting in my relationship with comedy before where I am now was that I don't feel like I had a voice in my relationships, right? So I'm like, the first comedy special that I saw was Kevin Hart, right? And it was, I think, maybe Seriously Funny or I'm a Little Grown Man, right? And I saw with my ex-boyfriend at the time, and he's talking about the relationship dynamics. And I'm just sitting here like, baby, you hear what he's saying? Like, you be hurt about feelings sometimes. And I didn't have the voice to say, but I'm hoping this comic goes there so that he can say what I'm trying to say to my man. You ain't shit. Stop cheating on me, So that's when I think about my relationship with comedy, I feel like these comics and creators in general are saying what I want to say, but I'm too afraid to say. And I think it makes sense that like sometimes I get labeled as like a little bit too put together in comedy because you have to think about I left my job. I left a 6-figure job and I was mad at white people. And that's what triggered my career. It wasn't like I'm over here like really looking into like the theories and the things that happen in comedy. I'm just like, I'm mad. I love my job and I had to lose it because somebody that I thought was my ally threw me under the bus. So it's funny on stage, but when I was living through it and like putting my 6-figure job in the moment, I was like, I'm about to be a broke bitch. I'm about to be a broke bitch that stood up for myself. So now I feel like I'm able to talk to people that have these jobs or like want to quit or like don't know what they want to do in their lives. And I'm able to talk for you. I'm like, baby, you don't have to say anything. I'm gonna say it for you. Like recently, my new thing at the comedy shows have been to acknowledge that I wasn't supposed to be here. And I'll be like, girl, I'm gonna ask your man, is he cheating on you for you? So I'll ask him, he's like, are you cheating? Are you buying her a house? And it's just funny because it's like, I think the comedy experience is bigger than just a person on stage. It's a conversation that happens after. Like you're like, oh, I like what she was saying about the whole cheating thing. Have you ever cheated? And it just opens a floodgate for another conversation. So I think that's what my relationship was before, and I'm starting to understand that's like my job. Because I'm still pretty young into this. So I'm just like, okay, I have to make people laugh. But I saw recently Patrice O'Neal, his special. Again, I'm not late. And it's a really good special, Elephant in the Room. He talks about a lot of shit that is not PC, but I think he's a really good comic in that. I think it's one thing to say to not be PC, but then not be funny because you have hatred in your heart.
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of people get misconstrued. It's like, if you're going to say something that is incorrect, you need to make sure it's funny so that there's a dialogue that's constructive, right? So like a joke that he said on the special was like, we need National Harassment Day. Because like, you're coming to work. I know it sounds crazy. Like you're coming to work and your titties are out. And it's like, how am I going to work with your titties? And it was like it's really a little incorrect. But like the way that he brought it back together, I thought was kind of genius. But everybody, I think that there needs to be a little bit of room for like not PC, but if you have to be funny and you can't do it from a malicious place. It's like, I think he did it from a place where it's like, I don't even know how to navigate this. So I think that's what kind of came through in the joke.
Mm.
So I don't know, I rambled on, but that's my relationship with comedy. I'm still learning, I'm still a student, and I'm very at the beginning of this phase. So I'm excited. Like, people be like, "Oh, you've been doing so much. Wait till I get good." Like, I'm not even good.
Yes, I love that.
Wait till
I get good.
Right? Because like I saw his special, and what I liked about it was that it felt like it was a conversation. So I'm watching this like with a guy, and he's bringing up shit, and I'm like, maybe pause this. You ever did that?
So you catch him.
Right. And you're in that moment of happiness. Like, it's not like I guess it's like the defenses were down. So it's like we're laughing. Okay, you laughing, I'm laughing too. Did you do that shit?
Right.
Right. Like,
too hard. Do you relate?
But did you do it? You didn't ask the question.
You laughed a little too hard. That shit is funny to you. I can't laugh.
Why are you laughing so hard?
Right. So
I don't like, just quick sidebar, when male comics then start making fun of women and how their women react when they go out, and then the guys turn the table and they'll be like, "Yep, that's you," and I'm like, "That's right, it's fucking me." And what? And you better not be. I'll be quick. But that's the point of comedy, right? It's kind of to put a mirror up and be like, "Hey, this is what you fucking look like, and this is what you sound like."
And that's what, not to bring it back to astrology, that's what Pisces people do. That's what Geminis do. They give you a mirror. So it's like, I think that a lot of like I've had a lot of issues in like my friendships, not anymore, but like in my 20s. And people will get mad at me because I'm literally giving you the energy you're giving me. And it's like, and that also translates to the audience. Like, sometimes I'll do a show at the same space, but the audience really matters in how your set goes. Like, I'll be vibing, and you never know, like a new joke could come through. Like, I'll be vibing with somebody, I can just tell like their energy, whatever. And then the other show is just like, it feels like a job. Like, it's like, okay, y'all laugh at something, I know these jokes work. I've said it 100 times. Like, some people are like a little, I guess, more harder to make laugh, but sometimes people don't laugh and they come to you after the show like, "You were great." I'm like, "Bitch, why you didn't laugh?"
I feel like sometimes I'm that audience member where like sometimes somebody will be mad funny and I'm not audibly laughing, but I'm like, that was, in my head, I'm like, "Oh, that was funny. Oh, that was funny." And then like, I feel like, like when you're mad funny if you get like an audible, like, ha, 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 out of me. Like, but just because I don't laugh doesn't mean you wasn't funny.
No, I feel like, and now that I think about it as an audience member, I'm not like a big like laugher. I'm like, "Oh my God," like I'll say that. And I used to be like at open mics and say that, and like people get really offended, like, "Why you have a comment for everything?" I'm like, I'm laughing.
Right. This is how I'm experiencing joy. And I think that's a good segue to even talk a bit about what is your community's response to your creative expression. So when you're on stage and you're out here, like, and even when outside of them being in the physical audience, even experiencing your social media and other things, like, what's some of the feedback and responses you get?
So I'm actually, sometimes I feel like I do struggle with my own community, like, only because I feel like, and not in a bad way, I feel like they're pushing me to go deeper, right? And I think when the pandemic happened, before the pandemic, like, I was doing a lot of like whole jokes and like things that were kind of like easier, because it's just like I had built a set, I learned the formula for that set, and I was comfortable there. But this pandemic really reset everything and had forced me to address things that haven't been addressed. And a lot of that I'm realizing has to be after letting bad, right? Like, and I think the position that I'm in is very tricky and very challenging, because a lot of people will be like, "Okay, you're Dominican, but you're not like the other Dominicans that think that are racist, but you Black. But why are you like that? Why are you in a Black sorority? Like, talk to me about who you are." And it's like, I'm getting to the place where I'm starting to explain. And even sometimes I find in our own community, like a lot of Afro-Latinas, that I can see why there can be problematic. Like, it's like you were saying, Julissa, this is not something that it's like, "Oh, you know what? Like, I could be that." It's like, I've always felt this way. I just didn't have a word for it. And now I have a word, and I feel like I'm not taking space from someone that I care about, but I still get to live in my own, like I still get to make a way, but not take space. Like sometimes I think about like, what does that look like when these opportunities from Hollywood are coming in? And I'm like, they cast me as like a Black African-American woman. It's like, is that going to be problematic? Even though I do consider myself Black, but it's like, I don't ever want to take the space from someone else. But then I'm left with the Latinx media. And there's a lot of times where I feel like I'm being embraced more, but I do feel like it's a challenge. It's like, I have to be exceptional. Like, you know what, that's that Dominican stand-up, and they put me on, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, that's why I'm really big on creating your own opportunities, because I never want to get in the way of anything. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna make legendary studios, I'm gonna put my friends in it. You as a community make what you want out of it, but I never want to be a person taking someone's place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and I think that that's beautifully articulated. I think I've struggled with articulating exactly what you just said, is that the relief of the word was not, oh, I'm smarter now and I'm more educated. It's oh, and now I don't have to feel guilty anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have to feel weird about knowing who I am in a way. It's really important. And it leads me to my next question of like, what your first impressions were of what Black women in comedy were supposed to be like. Because I know, like, for me growing up, like, the visibility of Black female comics was less, and not because they didn't exist, but because a lot of my entryway to listening to stand-up comedy on TV was like watching, like, you know, sitting behind my brother when he had his boys over and I wasn't supposed to be in the room, but I really wanted to watch the specials and stuff like that. And I'd sneak around, and they, as men, were not like watching Monique stand-ups. Nobody was watching Sykes. Like some of these comics who I know, who I only learned because of television, right? And so when I think of some of these Black comics, I think of them and I think of their TV personas. And so like Nikki Parker is Monique in my head, right? And so many years of getting to know her out, you know, as an older person who can receive her comedy, because for some of those specials I was too young to understand, right? But I think my perception of the power of women in comedy was very eclipsed. I didn't realize the power of the Black comic on stage until much later on in life. So I'm just curious, for you going into it as Black woman, like, what was your impression of what being a Black female comic was supposed to be like?
I feel like when I think about it, I feel like Black women still don't get the credit that they deserve for being on stage. And I think a lot of the time people associate like, oh, Black women always talk about sex. What's wrong with that? Like I spoke about this on another podcast, like a lot of the white girls always talk about like pegging men or doing other things. Like, why is it so vilified that we talk about sex? I personally, like, I always have the struggle, like, should I talk about like sucking dick, whatever, because everyone thinks I'm gonna do it anyways. But it's like, that's part of the experience. And it's also like, when I started doing comedy, I realized I was forgiving myself for a lot of things that happened in my 20s. That I was like, I didn't get to enjoy this shit because men were like, you can't enjoy it. But it's like, it's my life, you know? So it's like, they should be able to talk about it. And I also think it's like, when I see some of the women that, there are so many Black women in comedy that don't have visibility yet, that I know that when they get put on, it's gonna be like, wow, like this woman exists. Like I've seen women that like they just have this great storytelling ability, and it's like, I want to be like her. Like I just think that Black women are still vilified, and I think that that's my perception of when I think about the Black comic. And I think all of us have this whole struggle, like, can I embrace my sexiness and also be a comedian? Becoming more like, people create this space for women to be able to do both, but men still be annoying. Like it's so annoying. They'd be like, oh, and especially because they think they can do what you do. Yeah, I've had a few guys that'd be like, oh yeah, I could be a comic. Don't make me bluff you. You're not funny. It's really a gift. Like it is like comedic timing is not something that I don't think you can learn. And you can kind of tell, like when you see stand up, where it's like, okay, this person really is doing a great job at doing their homework. But then there's just people that get on stage and you're like, yo, that was a great conversation. You forgot they were performing the whole time. Like, so yeah, I don't know if I answered the question. I just think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think there's a lot of Black comics that are just amazing. Like people that I see all the time, and I'm just like, I want to be like y'all. Like, and I feel like when it comes to the comedy game, and even part of the reason why I'm in a Black sorority, Black women have always looked out for me. They'd be like, you know what, girl, let's bring you over here because you need some guidance. And I feel like sometimes I do feel like with the Latinx community, it has to be like, oh, this person is getting all this notoriety. Let's also claim her. And it's like, y'all want to bring them under my wing. And I'm sure that there are comics that bring certain other comics under their wing, but it's like, I don't want to have to wait to be this great thing when you could have, like, I've had conversations with women, they call me, we talk for an hour. They're like, like amazing women that have toured with like Chris Rock or other people, and they sit and they talk to me for an hour of their time and day to be like, this is what I went through in comedy. I want to just pass this on to you, do whatever you want. And it's like, I'm amazed that it's like, you even know who I am. Oh my God. So it's like, I always, and I feel like when I think of Afro-Latino that's what I want to be able to do. Like, I want to live and be proud of my Dominican background, but I also want to make sure that I make space for the Black women that have been there for me. Because I know that a lot of people, they are there. My whole team, I have like a team that we create skits and we're working on digital stuff, all Black women. Like, so I hope I answered the question.
No, you did. And I think, and something that while you were speaking that sort of came up for me in sort of digging into the nuance of Blackness from the Dominican lens is that I remember one time I went to see a comedy show in LA, and actually Sasha was in it. Sasha Mercy was in
I love it. That's my baby.
It was like, there was a few folks in there, and it was funny because first of all, like she did come and she fucking cleared the set. Like she like killed it, was one of the funniest people there. But then for the majority of the show, what it was, you know, Dominican men taking up space. And I think two things. One, the way that Dominicans speak in general is a comedy. Like we in our storytelling, like I'm not a comic, but I be mad funny sometimes just talking, but I'm not trying to do stand-up. I'm just talking. And that's just the animation that I grew up seeing from any and everybody who was around me, who was Dominican, right? So, you know, there's this like natural charm that men come into right away, but oftentimes, and now I'm talking off stage, women do not have the same space to have that sort of tongue and be cheeky in certain circles where there's enough men who are taking up that spotlight. You know what I mean? And so
around Dominican men, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. Like even like there's this show that I do kind of like every week in front of this Dominican barbershop. And at first, like I feel like the men were like, all right, she's cute, funny. But then with the way that I calibrated my brain, is like, you can't do what I do. You can't even get up on the stage. You're mad. You can't get up here. Right. You can't, like, you know, so it's like, I don't let that shit bother me. I'm like, whatever. And it's giving me all this confidence. Like I'll go in circles. I'm like, I don't care. Like, but you have to think about it. That's back to like that energy that people are like, that we're talking about. It's like, it's this like idea of what you think this person's supposed to be, but deep down, this person's really insecure. Like, and you can see that from stage. Like even as an audience member, when you look at the person performing, you can literally see, and I think that's what makes you like a comic or not. You can see their aura. You can see their insecurities. They're masking it with jokes, but they're insecure up there. Everybody that does perform, like you have some kind of insecurity, you know? It's like you can be all this machismo shit you want to do, but it's like, I know as a human being, you want to be hugged. Yeah. That's what you want. Yeah. But I totally, it's hard. And honestly, like I feel like I've done shows for my Dominican community in controlled environments. And I think, so like, for example, when I was doing Sound Culture, it's like, yeah, it's a Dominican show, but we controlled that environment because it was like, okay, we're going to have an open bar. Y'all gonna be lit. So less judgy. And we're going to invite, like, the lineup is going to be such a way where it's like, I know you're going to have a good time. Right? But I haven't done like a show where it's like, I've been invited to, I guess maybe like Room 28 counts, where I've been invited and I didn't have the control of that thing. To be honest, I'm just still scared of performing in front of like the Dominican community specifically because I feel like not Dominican enough sometimes, right? It's like I know what I am. My name is Glorelys. Like that's all that I need for my car.
Yep. It is a very Dominican name.
Community, but like sometimes people don't even know that I'm Dominican. They don't believe me. I'll be at the supermarket. You're like, you're Dominicana. See, let me the fuck in, you know? So I think that and I sometimes feel like the level of comedy that I'm trying to do is a little bit more intricate. I can't say that word, but that it's just,
yeah,
it's not surface. Like I don't want to talk about. I think it's important to talk about the dynamics of relationships in general, right? But sometimes I want to talk about the fact that I hate my white boss. I want to talk about the fact that I think that we're on a floating planet. Does anybody not recognize that? Like we're floating, and I want to talk about my existential crisis. But sometimes, like in our community, we don't acknowledge that stuff. It's like, oh, like you know. Mm-hmm. But I think that the more I'm finding like safe ways to introduce that, and the way to do that is by learning how to write better jokes. So it's not like fall flat. It's like I'm gonna have a joke to follow it. So, like I said,
I feel like another thing that plays into that also is the lack of representation in the community. But I think that as like time goes on, you represent a certain part of the community that people are going to be looking to identify with, because like I feel like there's like levels to like our Latinxness, right? Like sometimes you have like the super Dominican, like immigrant parents, like doesn't speak a lick of English, but then you have the kids that like are second and third generation that maybe didn't pick up Spanish as easily, or didn't, grew up in a more English speaking community, grew up in a more Americanized culture. And so they still identify with their Dominicanness, but they also have like all these other facets of them that they want to showcase. And so I think like you're gonna figure it out, like how to balance out like your Dominicanness with everything else that it is that goes into like your comedy and whatnot.
That because sometimes I just be like, oh my god, like I go Latino Carnival, right? And that was a challenge for me as well, because it's like the Latinx community is so diverse, and it's very like I had to write it with a partner that was Mexican and Peruvian to balance out like the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing. Like Hollywood knows a lot of Central American Latinos, but when it comes to Puerto Rican Dominicans, you know, their one point of representation is Jennifer Lopez.
Look, I'm not. So it's like there's a lot of work to do, and sometimes I think about it like we said earlier, there's not a Dominican stand-up that I look at and I'm like, yo, I look up to that Dominican stand-up. I want to be like, I don't have a Dominican Dave Chappelle, right? There are people that I admire and I think they're doing a great job, but when it comes to that level of caliber of like a legendary comedian, I don't have that representation, and it's kind of like crazy to think that there's a big chance that I might be this Dominican legendary comedian.
Yes,
like,
come on, speak it into existence.
I mean, it's like, yo, I don't know Dominican stand-up, even like doing it now. And so like, sometimes like when you claim it, people are like, wow, that's true. Like, I don't think, like I had asked, like, I was being pretentious today for International Women's Day. I'm like, I'm gonna highlight my damn self because
yes, I saw that post. I was like, come on, bitch.
So hard. I am building opportunities for myself. I am monkey barring survival. Like I went from like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was on March 13th today, just about in tears. I'm like, yo, I'm about to get evicted. I don't got a job. Then it was like, I'm gonna give you unemployment. I was like, okay. Then unemployment was gonna run out. I was like, okay, what do I do? Contact somebody in marketing, like give me a job. You know, like I have been hustling, and it's like I had to recognize myself. And in the post, I was like, how many Dominican stand-ups you have? Yep. Right. So keep talking shit because I'm the going and only. I'm about to be up there, you know?
Yeah, fuck it up.
So, but I still have and you know, part of the reason I think there's a lot of pain that happens. I always try to be like creators and comedy because it comes from somewhere, right? There's a lot of pain that I've harbored from my own community. That's why I think it's hard sometimes to be like, okay, I'm about to tell you, y'all little racist. Don't be mad at me. But it's like, it's a lot of pain that I've experienced from my own community, right? And it's like since I was a little girl, like, and it's interesting because it happens in my immediate family, which is kind of like weird because I'm like tying it back to like Archie. My dad is a white man and my mom is a more trigueñita woman. And I always felt like when it came to not that anybody in my family was ever like, oh, she's brown, But it's like I look different from y'all. Like anybody, like if you look at the optics of what a family looks like, I look adopted. So it wasn't like anybody made me feel that way. I saw myself and I'm like, yo, like I don't look like my sister. I don't look like my dad. Like I barely look like my mom. People be like, oh, you look like your mom. I'm like, they're just trying to make me feel included, you know? So it's like there is a pain that is deep rooted within my own Dominicanness, even as an adult having to try to prove that I am Dominican. I'm like, oh my God, y'all gonna keep making me do this shit? So it comes from somewhere. And I think that when people think about pain, like, oh, what? Like, I think a lot of people are like, okay, it looks like you have a great life on the internet because I lie. Why are you doing comedy? Because white people have let me down, because my own community has let me down, because men have been really mean to me and try to belittle me all of my dreams, because I don't like to talk about the fact that I have been a survivor of many things. So I don't want to be branded as that. Because then you say one thing like, okay, well, this girl, you know, but I've survived a lot of stuff, you know, domestic abuse, a lot of other things. And it's like, this comes from a real place. I'm able to laugh about it now, or like make a joke in a way where it's like, this has happened. And some people like don't, like when you say it on stage, you're like, is that real? Like, is she lying? But it's like, I'm forgiving myself. And it's like, whatever. So it comes from a real place. And I have been hurt by the Dominican community. I'm gonna write a book about it. But I still am proud. Like, I'm so proud. I love my culture. I want to make sure that I pass that on to my kids. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done within a lot of Latinx communities and probably even brown communities, POC. I'm sure like the things that we go through in Latinx like experiences are probably similar things that the Asian American community goes through. And I'm not that deep and rooted because I wasn't born that way, but I'm sure like they have the same thing. Like it's like I'm of a mixed identity. My parents have these traditions or whatever. So it's like,
I can struggle, but I think to highlight a couple of things that you said before asking the next question. First of all, you know, it is extremely difficult to come into your own when, first of all, comedy, like the mainstream comedy is a white dominant industry, right? And so you have that going against you. And then, you know, like wonderful that the Black community itself has such a strong stake in comedy that like they have space, right? Like they might not dominate in terms of financials and who's getting the best deals all the time.
Kevin Hart is one of the most paid comics.
I was gonna say, unless, you know, white people love you so much that then you get these big time offers because you could be as funny as Monique. And I mean, the whole Netflix thing and the payment, like, you know, we've seen it, right? And so, but then it's hard enough to then be part of a nuanced group within a certain community that through their own issues that are not comedy things, manifest in the way that you navigate that world. And suddenly you have to do just that. You have to think about how you're actively navigating, because like Dominican Republic is one of the places that has the highest domestic violence rates in all of the Caribbean. Now we're not just talking Latinx, right? You know, like there's a lot of anti-woman sentiment that is ingrained in our culture, and sometimes not even with the intention of hate from the people who are practicing it, but it is just so part of our culture that you know, as you're speaking, I'm like, yeah, it's also important for you as you continue to flesh out how much more of your personal story gets into the comedy, that you recognize that like even comedy is an act of like political resilience, right? Like even comedy. And so the more that you share those stories, and by the way, what you share already does so much for so many girls and women who don't have space to even be at the level that you're at of openness, let alone where you can go if you continue, right? But that's important, and you're absolutely right. If you told me name 5 Dominican comics, I'm naming Instagram people.
Right.
You're on the list. You know what I mean? And you're on the list, and that's that. And so we have to be able to recognize that there's bullshit that we got to walk over, but that it's just bullshit. And the fact that you're walking is radical. And I 100% believe and know that like when we talk about Dominican comedy history, your name is always going to be brought up. Because
I put it in one of them books. Even if I have to write the book myself.
Because you're out here doing the work, not just like trying to get onto other people's shows and buttering up to other comics so they can put you onto shit. You are out here producing things. You are out here doing communal work that actually outshines this, oh, I went to these other little fucking spots and got a little, you know, like there's so many. dated a comic for a little bit. I know. In the throes. We can talk about that offline because you know who they are. You know, maybe you dated them too.
I do want to talk about the political part, right? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that your creativity is an act of like being some kind of like leader, right? And I'm just I don't want to be into politics. I don't want to have the burden of, you know, something like Meghan Markle having to speak out against it. But if I always think of my comedy as a Trojan horse, and that's what I want to do when I get good. I want to get in the building, you know, be laughing and then say some real shit and then leave. And it's like, you won't even know it because you weren't expecting it. And I do hope when I get better that I'm able to really talk about machismo candidly and about like racism within the Dominican community and just like really like you won't even know I'm talking to you about it. And it's like, wow, that's how good she is. She puts me into changing my life.
Yeah, I love that. That's very Dave Chappelle-ish. I feel like he does that in a very beautiful way. And I absolutely think that you have the capability of that storytelling. Again, you already do. Like you already are doing that work and the subtleties are there for those. You putting shit down, whether or not people are picking it up is their business, but you're definitely putting shit down.
Conte Nast is picking it up. I was like, how the fuck did y'all find me? Yes. Talk. Like people do talk and they, especially like when they see like, oh, I actually don't know another person that does this. This is the only person I know. Put my name in there.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So what would be some advice that you have for other Black women who are looking to explore their comedic expressions, whether it is stand-up, skits on Instagram, whatever the case is?
I think one of the most amazing things that comedy has taught me is self-validation. I think a lot of the things that we do in life are in some way tied to external validation. But once you accept everything and you forgive, you have to forgive. You have to really sit there and be like, you know what, bitch? We fucked up. We made a mistake. And I have to forgive. I think that's like what people are doing. They're healing, but you have to really forgive yourself. And when you put something out, make sure it's something that you're done with. So that when people talk about it or criticize it, it doesn't bother me. I've already dealt with that because I already sat and did the work. You can deal and project whatever you want to project onto it, but that's not a person that I am anymore. And I hope that it does help somebody else. So I think that my advice is to be so confident that nothing that anybody tells you fucks, because people don't fuck with you. When I was starting, people were like, you're not a comic. Look at this who the fuck named you the legend? I'm like, but you bothered.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a joke, but you're taking this thing real serious.
Right.
So just like validate yourself and have fun. Like my thing is like part of the reason why the legendary brand came up, it wasn't just to be obnoxious on purpose, which is part of my brand, but I was really sitting. I've had I talk about existential crisis a lot because when I was at my late 28, 29, I was having my Saturn return. When you start realizing mortality is a real thing. I'm like, oh my God, you know? And I was just like, yo, if I'm gonna do the most embarrassing thing that there could be on earth, which is to get up in front of people, I have to be the best. And I think that's something that's ingrained in every like Black or brown person is if you're gonna do something, to be the best at that thing, janitor, whatever. So I'm like, I gotta be a legend. There's no other option. So it's like, I forgot how I got there, but the point of the story is that you have to just believe in yourself more than anybody else. And even when you don't believe in yourself, you better have some good ass friends that remind you. You better pick your friends good. Because if you put the wrong people in life, you're gonna go down the wrong path. Like I can say that, you know, sometimes, and I'm sure this happens in your friendship as well. We have days when one of us is up and the other one's not so good. And the other one be like, bitch, you better get the fuck up. That's not my friend. Get the fuck up right now, you know? And it's like, I have this in all my friends. Like, I really look up to my friends. Like, I think that they are amazing women. And I'm like, yo, like, I'm honored that we're creating legacy together. Like, I always think about the fact that it's like one day, 20 years from now, there's gonna be a picture of the three of us, like they were friends, like these Dominican comedians. So I'm like, I think it's important to also, and I think a lot of Black women struggle with finding good friends. I think sometimes we haven't been good friends or other people haven't been good friends to us, but when you're gonna go into your hustler shit, you need to have good friends around you.
Yep.
And have that same whatever that means, friendship, you need to make sure you're on the same page about that shit. Because everybody has different, it's like a relationship.
Yep, 100%. I love that advice. I love that advice. It is crucial. It's crucial not just in comedy, in life, by the way. So if you're listening and you're not a comic, you should probably still take this fucking advice. Because you have to move with your self-confidence. And I just want to give you your flowers again, Glory. You're out here, you're doing the work. I mean, I met you coming into my space at WeWork being like, yeah, I'm helping to curate this Harlem festival.
Energy.
That
day I had energy. I'm like, who is the manager? He's like, I work here. I can help you. We're doing a panel with Bob Sumner, the creator of Def Comedy Jam.
No, and it honestly, like, I think that just like to have seen you, to have gotten to meet you, not through like Instagram and the social shit, but actually just having a business moment and then sort of peeking in and being like, oh, okay, this woman is a powerhouse. Like, wait a minute, right? Because I knew the other person who you were producing with because they had done it in the space before. But then I was like, where was she last year? Like, this is the one. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I'm really annoying to work with. I will let you know because I'm very particular. I got a little better, but I'm like, if you're doing a production, because I come from this like marketing background, right? And it's like I already like whenever I put something out, I want it to be brand first. Like I want it to be like I'm already on HBO. HBO said this was on their show. They just haven't published it yet. That's how I put things out. Like they just haven't got to it yet.
Yeah. And that's the right, and that again, it goes back to your piece of advice. It's that confidence, right? It's that you can't become a legend if you're not ready to claim the legendary shit, right? So if you're not claiming it, legendary doesn't fall on your lap. Legendary is work, and in another word you use, it's legacy. It's legacy work. It's I'm doing this now, but I understand the ripple of the legacy.
Right. And to be honest, at first I was gonna go Beyonce comedy, but somebody already had that. So I was like, what makes Beyonce great? It's like she's a living legend. Like she creates everything she's creating is gonna have so much value for years to come. And it's like it really comes from work ethic, and anybody could be a legend. Like it's not just towards comedy or anything. It's like anybody could be a legend. Like you do things with intention.
Yeah.
Because what we building legacies for the babies or whoever's coming.
Right. 100%. 100%. Well, girl, I just want to say thank you so much for be on Ladies Who Bronche, for your ongoing support of Ladies Who Bronche. Know that we are here to support you and your comedy. I can't wait. Like you could shoot me a virtual link if you're doing virtual shows, but I can't wait to see you live again soon. As soon as the world opens up. For everybody listening, this bitch is funny. The bitches, she's really funny, and I just think that it is so important that we start to get off platform and support people in person, because it's not just showing likes on IG. When the world opens up, I am ready to be sitting in these chairs, to be
clapping. I want everybody in the chairs. It's so much better. Life is so much better off the internet. It's great. Like you can't take away what people do on the internet. Like it's a lot of work, even on the other side, like doing these stupid lights. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but you have to, like, people are talented in different ways, but it's nice to experience life, like art in person, in intimate. Like that's how you get shit that's life changing, So
absolutely. And you out here, you gonna change some lives, girl. I can't wait until we interview you again down the line, right? Where Ladies Who Bronche full flesh, like on TV type shit, and you're on TV, and it's official tissue shit.
Ladies Who television show, they produce. I was like, talking points, segments, transition. Okay. HBO ready.
I was literally about to say, well, I'm trying to be HBO ready too, sis.
Exactly.
I'll be HBO
brand.
It's the brand.
Hey, they're gonna call.
You'll see soon. So Glory, tell us any shout outs you have, any up and coming things that we can look out for, just general last comments.
The Latino card revoke game, I wrote it a while ago. It's getting some buzz. Y'all need to buy that. It's all over Clubhouse. Somebody started a Clubhouse with like the cards. I'm like, wait, oh my God, y'all care about like, so it was really dope. I was like able to speak about that. I am writing a book. It's about Afro-Latinidad. It's coming out sometime in my lifetime, but it's gonna come.
Yeah, you
And I
right.
just want y'all not to be mad at me when I say some shit. Because I just think that we all have, I'm being honest, don't be mad. It's coming from my personal experience. So I just, you know.
It is what it is. You said what the fuck you said, and that's what you gonna publish.
And I'm like, I hope, because we all have different, like we all come into it at different points, but we'll see what happens. And nothing, I'm on Instagram, Glorelys Mora, I'm Twitter. I'm not really on Twitter like that. And just support me when the world opens back up.
Yes, 100%. Skittles, where can they find us?
Yes, y'all could all find us at Ladies Who Brunch on Instagram, Ladies Brunch on Twitter, Ladies Who Brunch on Facebook, Ladies Who Brunch on YouTube, at Julissa with an H on Instagram, and at The Real Skittles with a Z on Instagram.
Yes, yes. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and until next time, Bronche.
Bye.